Today I'm speaking with Jill Krzyzanowicz. She is been a teacher for 22 years. She's just written a memoir called When the Apple Falls Far from the Tree. And it's talking about her road to sobriety and spirituality and all of the lessons that she learned along the way. So I hope you enjoy the podcast today. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast for this week. This week, it's going to be a very interesting conversation. I have school teacher Jill Krzyzanowicz, who has recently written her own memoir and has faced some struggles that I think a number of us, well, many of us already have faced or will face in our life. And she is really the poster child for what one of the listeners about this podcast is all about. You know, being at this stage of our lives and looking at this next chapter and going, well, what is that going to be and how can I step into that in an empowered way? So, Jill, how are you, darling? How are you today?
I am wonderful. Thank you so much for having me here in your community today, Natalie. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to our conversation today because your book is called When the Apple Falls Far from the Tree. So I'm assuming, being a memoir, that that you have an interesting childhood, going into womanhood, going into the stage of your life that you're at now, that has had some, let's not call it positive or negative, let's just say some influence on your life. So yes. Tell us a little bit about, what the book is about, but then I want to go into, why it was important for you to be able to get this experience of yours onto paper.
Sure. So as you mentioned, I have quite a bit of life experience, we'll call it. And I suppose that is what helped me to decide that a memoir needed to be written after all. There was just too much that had happened throughout my life to not create a memoir. When I originally decided I was going to write a book, it really was more so to extract all that was within me and kind of pull it out and look at it on some pages. I had no idea that it was going to elicit this healing journey, and it was a substantial healing journey. And little did I know that it was going to also become this spiritual path back to myself. It was going to take me back to these roots. It was going to help me bring about some forgiveness that I needed for these toxic roots that I had. It basically was a can of worms that unfolded that I had no expectations for. So it was really interesting. I got started probably just before COVID hit. So when COVID hit, it kind of interrupted the entire world. But for me, it was a blessing in disguise because it gave me the time at home that I needed to finally sit down and really get to work on those pages. And as I wrote the story and began doing that extraction that I was talking about, I began to see how maybe my story could help the readers as well. There was a silver lining or a gift in each of these adverse experiences that I had gone through. And I thought, wow, there's a tool or something here that a listener or a reader might be able to connect with. And I started rewriting the chapters and tweaking them a little bit to outline that gift or that tool to kind of make it more, to have more of a self-help spin, if you will. And when the book was finished in its entirety, then I said, okay, now I know why I wrote this book. I am meant to share the story and help other people connect back to that self-loyalty, that inner compass, that inner voice, not only that inner child in that, but also that future self, and bring them back together and learn to lead from that place going forward.
Yeah. And you have a unique perspective because you work with kids. Like, how old are the students that you work with?
I've worked with anywhere from preschoolers up to fifth graders, but the beginning of my story and much of my story takes place in those very early years. And of course, through this awakening and through this book writing experience, I have done a lot of work understanding just how much of our psychology and life is shaped in those first 7 years of life. And it really shows and explains so much of what came to be and how much shaped me, because that's when a lot of of my adversity happened in those very early years. And it helped me to understand why I was shaped and, had the feelings and experiences that I did, because so much of it was then. So it helps me to be a more compassionate and understanding teacher, because I work with the same type of population, children in an impoverished inner city school, which is the city that I'm actually from. I actually work in my own childhood school that I went to as a child, which is obviously a wonderful opportunity. So it brings an extra ounce of compassion, if you will, because those people played a major role in my life when I was so young.
Yeah. Well, I've created a social emotional learning curriculum for schools. So I also understand how important it is for a child to have just maybe one person in their life, whether it's a teacher or some kind of adult or mentor that believes in them.
I have a whole chapter outlined to my third grade teacher, and what a role he played in me growing up to become a teacher myself. And the amazing thing is, I had the opportunity when I wrote my book and published it, I wrote out a little dedication to him and I hand delivered it to him. He happens to live just down the road from me, and he's up there in age now. And when I handed him that book and said, I want you to know I wrote a book and I dedicated a chapter in there to you, he actually was taken aback and said that he felt guilty that at the time, he had no idea that my life at home was so bad and that he would have done more had he known. And I explained to him that was exactly the magic. He wasn't even giving me special treatment, yet there he was, being the knight in shining armor that I needed at that time in my life. And that was exactly what inspired me to become a teacher, and that I hope that someday I could be there for even one child, like you said. Didn't matter if it was 1 or 100. Someday I wanted to be the right person in the right place for the right kid who needed it. So it was very inspiring.
I love that. Now, I do encourage you, if you're listening to this podcast, I encourage you to go to Amazon and to purchase the book, When the Apple Falls Far from the Tree. It's actually written under Jill's pen name, which is Margot Riley. And we don't necessarily need to go into the specific events because, I'm encouraging people to read the book itself. But how did your childhood affect you as an adult, or how, why did you, feel like you needed to get to a point where, you needed to change some things?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I think it helped me understand myself in that I had a lot of self-sabotaging patterns as I grew older. I turned to food. Food became the thing that I turned to for comfort. And I did a lot of work to figure out why that was. I had a mother who could not love. I have a very big mother wound. I write about that a lot in the book. And come to find out, when I was growing up, that was one of the only ways that my mother did show love as I was growing up. And so when she made food, we ate it, and we ate all of it. And I would ask for more of it because that was one of the only ways that I got love and affection from her. And so there I was, always consuming food, which then, of course, brought about my obesity problems later in life and then led me to weight loss surgery journeys. I also turned to alcohol. I come from a very, very long line of alcoholics on both sides of my family, both my mother and father, severe alcoholics. And I started numbing through all of my adult years until just about 3 years ago. And I would say that I never admitted that I had a drinking problem myself, because I was always a happy-go-lucky drinker. I was good time. And on the video, I was the one singing karaoke all hours of the night and crawling up the steps to get in. And in my family, most of the people were the type who got violent or were crying or were screaming. So in comparison, I didn't really think that I had a problem until I saw how over the years it was escalating and I needed more and more. Then my daughters grew up and in their teenage years would have video clips and would be poking fun of us as we were entertaining guests. And I thought, okay, no. We just have too much of a family pattern of this. I do not want to turn into my mother and father. And I started this sobriety journey, also mentioned in the book. And when I did that, simultaneously at the same time, my mother was drinking herself to death. And literally, she died of liver disease. She just passed away just over a year ago. And that was a very big eye opener. And it was also a tough time. I had set some boundaries prior to her death about whether or not I was going to go to her bedside. I had decided previously I wasn't, because I had stopped seeing her and participating in her lifestyle. So again, all of these things are mentioned in the book, but it's just amazing how all of those things that I witnessed and saw in childhood ultimately followed me into adulthood and challenged me. And then I had to make decisions about how they were going to look and play out in my life.
Mm. So I know that you're talking about sobriety with alcohol and with food, but I think for all of us, we all have a coping mechanism, whatever
Absolutely.
that is. For me, TV can be that. If I want to numb out, I'm like, I'll just sit there and watch TV and, have a glass of wine or whatever. And again, you go through these excuses, explanations. I'm only having a couple of glasses, but when it's every day, it's every day. It's and that sobriety can be, whether it's from food or TV or alcohol or whatever that is, can be a really challenging journey. So how did you stay the course? Well, what was some of the things that you adopted that really helped you to break through to the other side?
I love this question. And let's just say I'm still trying to stay the course. I will say I wouldn't change it for the world. I love the challenge of staying the course. However, there are definitely going to be tools needed. For example, I didn't realize how much of my life revolved around alcohol with my friendships. So the second I stopped partaking in drinking all the time, the invites to the parties stopped coming, and my friendship circle started getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So obviously, I had to think about what I was going to do to get around that. And so I started incorporating new things in my life. I started joining new groups online, obviously, going into different containers of people who were also partaking in sobriety. But I just started, as I started spiritually awakening and finding people like you, Natalie, I started getting into containers and reading books and tapping into things like meditation and chakras and essential oils and just this whole world of things that I had never said those words. I did not know anything about them. And for the past 2 to 3 years, they have been my life. And I've adopted what I like to call my morning power hour, which is, journaling and meditation and sitting with essential oils and getting my day set up for success. I have a very similar yet shorter version of that in the evening before I go to bed. And again, these are things that were never part of my life before that are now. And I realized that these two are coping mechanisms, and they're just much healthier ways of dealing with my feelings and being in my feelings and getting still, getting calm with myself. And instead of reaching for, a drink or the food, I am just sitting with myself and being with myself and honoring things and going into the day and exiting the day in a different way than I used to.
Yeah. And when you say you're more in commune with yourself, I'm assuming you're meaning the essence of who you really are, because you've touched a little bit on this, this spiritual journey. So let's go into that a little bit, because, I'm the same. Like if I can get into bad habits, and then you kind of realize, well, I don't spend any time with myself. I'm not alone with my thoughts enough. I've always got something else that's going to help me avoid thinking or getting in touch with that. And then you kind of you realize you're just going through the motions, and life is just whatever. It's like, oh my God, a whole year is gone. You kind of get into that. So tell us a little bit about what this spiritual journey looked like for you.
Well, I think I owe it all to this 90-day sobriety program that I did. And I have to give credit to Rebecca Weller, who wrote the book, A Happier Hour. I picked up that book because a friend actually suggested to me, she said, hey, I just read this book and I think you might identify with the main character. So I read the book and lo and behold, the main character, Rebecca Weller, and I had very parallel lifestyles. And when I got to the last page of that book, she proposed her 90-day sobriety program. And so I bought into it for $200. I had never done any sort of, number one, sobriety program or challenge. And number two, I had never done any sort of coaching program ever before in my life. And again, this was about 3 years ago. And so it was daily emails, and her daily emails were not, it wasn't just like her saying, okay, another day, you got this. She had interviews with women. She had links to blog sites. She had, rituals to try out and things to try out. And it was all of this name dropping that she had in there, because she was giving us breadcrumbs, and then I would follow those breadcrumbs to these other places. And as I mentioned, it took me to all these tools that I would, next thing you know, I'm doing EFT and I'm doing emotional freedom tapping. And I'm like, wow, I've actually got a way to calm down. I don't have to flip out on my husband. I can go in a room and shut the door, and I can tap on my meridians, another word I had never heard of. And it was just one thing after the other. And I just kept following the breadcrumbs. I'm still following the breadcrumbs. Like, I can't believe that I'm doing podcasts and that I'm talking about a book that I have published. I would have never, ever expected all of this to transpire. And I know that sobriety and my spiritual awakening is the reason that this is all unfolding. And I'm just loving every minute of this path that is unfolding before me.
I love that. So tell me about your power hour. What does that look like?
So when I wake up in the morning, just after I let the dog out, I sit down, I get my essential oils going. I always pick something that kind of evokes clarity in my thoughts for the day. I sit down, and the very first thing I do is, usually I'd like to say that I just do a brain dump, but I'm more of a person who needs a prompt. I like something to get me going. So I usually buy any of the self-help journals that are out there, because I love to be, my thoughts to be evoked. So I usually do about 15 to 20 minutes of that. Then I do a little bit of my daily planner. I check in for the day, see what I have to do. I love to prioritize. I'm a color coder. I'm a box checker. I like to say, okay, this really does need to get done. This can get taken off of my list for today. Let's see. The next thing that I do, oh gosh, I'm drawing a blank right now. Then I come upstairs to my meditation room. I have a little Zen room. That's where I do my morning prayer. So again, I have some scents going up in that room too. And I do my little daily check-in. And I'm also like guided meditation. I have a hard time sitting still with myself when it's silent. But if I have a guided meditation, then I can get into the zone. So I usually start with like a 5-minute guided meditation or affirmations. And then I sit for 5 minutes by myself after that. And that is when I feel like the drop-in comes down. That's where my divine downloads come in. It's like after I've done a little bit of writing, I've done a little bit of setting the tone for my day, I do the guided meditation or the affirmations, and then I just sit with myself for a few minutes. That's when it comes in for me. And I just love it. And then when I drive to work, and my work is only 10 minutes down the road, but I've always got Esther Hicks or somebody playing in the car when I'm making that 10-minute drive as well, or Louise Hay, everything in the morning is always fresh. I'm one of those people that makes it a really super big effort to not get on the phone and not scroll first thing in the morning. I do not look at the news headlines. I try to stay away from my emails until later in the day. I try to just prioritize that good mental health, good vibing stuff early in the morning for sure.
Yeah, no, I love that. All right. So now I want to know, how has this changed your life? You had this realization, you notice these things, you're putting in the effort. And I mean, we all, same thing, we're on the journey. We have good days, we have bad days, it's whatever. But how has this changed your life?
I think the most important thing is, like you said, it's just this recalibration back to myself. I think it is amazing that I've been reintroduced to this girl I used to know. I love that my adult daughters, who are 20 and 24, have literally watched this happen in me, and that I get to be this role model for them. They get to see all of these things that I'm dabbling in, and I can see they're picking up on some of it. And of course, some of it, they're like, oh goodness, what is mom doing now? But they're also tuning into some of it and, picking up on some of it. So I definitely think that this recalibration back to self has me stepping into this zone of confidence and clarity that I have not known in 30 years. I'm 47 years old now, and I truly feel like Act 2 is just starting. I'm enrolled in spiritual life coach school. After the book came out, I was like, okay, I am definitely going to do some keynote speaking. I can see myself getting some midlife women motivated to tap back into their inner voice and knowing, look, this is the halfway mark, ladies. We can go out there and do other things. I could see myself creating some courses where I'm maybe teaching women about these morning power hours and how, this is all you got to do. Set yourself up for these amazing days by simply giving yourself 30, 45 minutes in the morning to change the whole freaking trajectory of how your day's going to go. If you're just eliminating the BS, setting the tone, I can feel this immense motivation brewing. So I really am looking forward to what's about to come. I'm thinking about starting my own podcast. So I'm starting to write up some episodes and thinking about how that's going to look. So I think there is definitely Act 2 right around the corner. And I feel like I'm stepping into it with definite confidence.
So what's been the most surprising thing that you get to experience now that you're like, wow, I didn't realize I've been missing out on this all these years, all this time?
The most surprising thing for me, I think, is quieting my capability. The life that I led, I played small for so long for that fear of outshining those around me, hence the title, When the Apple Falls Far from the Tree. I came from a family where people just didn't go to college and, they all had these toxic lives and they were all drinking and alcoholics. And I was one of the first to go up the pipe and become successful. And I always had that question in the back of my mind, who the hell am I? Who the hell am I? Who the hell do I think I am? And just stepping out and breaking that shell finally of why the hell did you play small for so long? That's not to say that I haven't felt gratified and sure of myself in being a school teacher all these years. I've been teaching for 23 years now, and there has never been a doubt in my mind that that is where I was supposed to be all these years. And I know for a fact that I have touched some lives and some families. But I also know for a fact right now in my heart of hearts that it's time to move on from that and to figure out what my teaching is going to look like from this point on. And I really feel that it's going to be teaching women and others who are looking to get out of that unstuckness of life. Like, it's just, we're not meant to say, oh, I made it here. Here I am. I had a great life. I think that every freaking day is about evolving and getting better and changing. And that life is never meant to be stagnant. And for us to say, oh, here I am. I made it. This is it. I don't think it's ever it. It's just constantly evolving.
Yeah. And what about your marriage, your relationship? What kind of changes have happened there as well? Because sometimes we can use that as an excuse.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I have been blessed in that I married my high school sweetheart. And by high school sweetheart, I mean, I met him in 7th grade. And I truly believe he's not only my husband and best friend, but I think he's been a spiritual teacher all along too. And I'm so lucky that he has been here to watch me morph and change through all of these seasons of my life, and has never once said, oh, you're crazy. Don't do that. What the hell are you thinking now? He's so proud of me every step of the way. He gets it. He loves seeing me evolve. And just like with my daughters, he might not be on every ride I'm on, but I can see him getting curious, and I can see that he takes bite-sized pieces of some of the stuff that I'm creating. And I love that he's there 100% cheering me all the way, for sure.
I love that.
I'm lucky.
Yeah, because that's the thing. Sometimes we change, and you were alluding before, like sometimes your friends change. I don't know how many times in my life I've gone through, owning different businesses, living in different parts of the city, living in different countries, friends evolve and they change. And sometimes you recycle and go back, and it's, that's kind of just the way it is. But I think having this very clear vision of who you want to be, and then making sure that, the people that you surround yourselves are supporting that, I think is really important on that journey as well.
It is important. And it's tough. It's tough when you have to make that decision. Sometimes you question, like, what happened there? And then I realize, oh, wait a minute. Every day as part of my prayer, I say, please cleanse me of all that no longer serves. Well, Sometimes that means people, places, and experiences that we thought were an integral part that are no longer an integral part, that are just, more so a season.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Well, Jill, congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
And I've also, I wrote a book which was fiction, but a lot of my own personal, journey in there as well. So I understand the challenge it can be, but how cathartic it can be.
Very cathartic.
Yeah. And the fact that you've gone through this life and you've had these experiences, but now, like, I know a lot of women who are listening to this podcast are the same. We get to this time of our life, the kids have grown up, we don't have as many responsibilities as we had before, but now it's like, well, it's not like I'm done. Like, what can I contribute? How can I make the world better? How do I, step into this better version of who I am? And I think that that's the majority of people that listen to this podcast. So I'm really happy that you are part of that movement, that you're a part of that message. And like I said, you're a poster child for exactly, the person who listened to this, but also for the experience that they can create for themselves as well, in their version of it. So,
Thank you. There are no excuses there. We are not victims. We just have to take what we've been dealt and make the most of it. And as you said, my book is a testament of that. And I hope that your listeners will give it a read because, really we come out stronger on the other side if we can just see what the lesson is in everything that comes our way, for sure.
Yeah. And we all have the ability to do that. So thanks again, Jill. It's been so fantastic chatting with you today.
Thank you so much for having me. I truly appreciate it, Natalie.